Dr. Kristy Taylor. I am a social impact career coach, and I focus on supporting organizations and individuals in the social impact sector. In this segment, I've been talking about building a resilient organizational culture. And in my last video, I talked about the role of leadership, and I'm going to harp on that in this particular video because I'm going to wrap it up for my focus on this portion of the series. So, I talk a lot about like leaders and the role that you play in kind of setting the tone, right? And it's important to have communication and transparency, to be adaptable and to like mitigate risk, because you are supposed to be the one with the strategic leadership skills and knowledge to be able to mitigate risk, not only for the operations portions of the business, but also for your team. Like you should know your team and the people who work for you and beside you, and who support the mission, or whatever you want to call it, who support the goals of the organization, the strategic priorities that you're working towards, so that you're planning from an HR perspective. There would be like succession planning, supporting individual personal and professional development, and looking at the people who are on your team as people, individuals. They may not always be a part of your organization, right? But we want to make sure that wherever we send people, that they had an awesome experience while working for us and with us on various projects. So, when we talk about strategies for cultivating a resilient organizational culture, because that's what it comes down to, culture, right? When it comes to that, it is like a strategic and holistic approach, and it involves commitment from you, the leader. And it also involves employee engagement and ongoing reinforcement of core values. Like, so if I ask you to drop 5 core values for your organization in the chat right now, could you do it? Could you do 3, 2, 1, right? Like, I'm in the military, so I always know that service before self-excellence, and all we do in integrity are our core values for being in the Air Force. But on the outside, as I run my business and the organizations I work for, there are core values that we adhere to, because it's part of our commitment. Now, especially for those of us, if you're listening to this and you're not in the social impact sector, because a lot of what I say applies to everybody, right? But particularly for us in the social impact sector, where we have made this commitment to making a difference in the lives of our communities, right? We have to be clear about what our vision and mission is, as well as our core values, and we have to really live that. So if you're trying to build organizational capacity and resiliency across any platform, whether business, social impact, these same principles are going to apply, right? There has to be a level of commitment from the leadership to include senior leaders who are going to champion that resilience as a core value and integrate it into the organization's mission, vision, and strategic objectives. I always say that the strategic leaders, your senior leaders, are your people who set the tone. Like, even in the jobs I have, like before I can roll out programs and projects, I still have to get it approved, right? So senior leaders, you set the tone to be able to champion this type of stuff. If you want a culture of resiliency, then you have to cultivate an environment where that culture is embraced, right? So that's just one part of it, and those are what I mean. And I've already talked about clear communication, being transparent in communication channels, information that you find challenging, be strategic about how it's communicated, but encourage open dialogue and feedback. Discuss a sense of, because all of that stuff builds a sense of trust. If we're talking about building a resilient organization, if you look at organizations in the past that have completely fallen apart, or maybe you have been part of a culture where it was great one day and then like a year later, like maybe people left and now the team is like completely different. The vibe is off. And take a look at what may have happened. What was your role as a leader? What did something happen that impacted the culture, even of the team dynamics? Employee engagement is a big piece of it. So leadership commitment, clear communication, employee engagement. You got to be like actively involved in your employees. You need to involve with your employees. It's not like I said earlier in the previous video. This is not a dictatorship. There are times where you have to be direct and make a decision, but for the most part, where you can get some input and engagement. I love the concept of work groups when there's like a big vision or something that we need to roll out. It just depends on like if the project if we have time for it, right? So we might establish committees, we do work groups, because we just want to get people engaged. We might do working meetings where in those meetings, when you create those action items, always put a date to things, right? The delivery date, what the expectations are. But engaging employees in the process so that they can feel a part of it is an important part of like shifting any culture or just building this culture of resiliency. It starts from the ground up. The connection, and sometimes we come into organizations that have to transition the culture, which we'll talk about at a later date. But all of the things I'm saying are still relevant because a big piece of this process in terms of employee engagement, we want to empower employees to be able to contribute ideas, share their feedbacks, and most of all, we want them to take ownership, not just for the projects that we give them, but also for the resiliency building efforts that we're doing. And so if you're coming into an organization and you have to do a cultural shift, just keep that in mind. How can you develop these committees, work groups, identify the tasks and things that need to be shifted? What can you identify as small wins and, working with employees to build out bottlenecks, to identify bottlenecks and map out processes so that you can clear some of the red tape? All of that plays a role. And I would look for the most simplest win as part of a strategic long-term cultural shift. Sometimes that even means you have to shift people, getting people in the right positions. The other thing too is developing your people. I say this over and over, but of course I'm going to say this because this is my job as an organizational development professional and coach, right? You got to invest in employee training and development programs. If you don't have them available, then there's plenty of things like you can do, like make the information accessible. There's so much stuff online where you can pull from and build out a program, so many models. And if you don't know how to do it, then you can hire somebody like Coach Taylor to come in and build a program out for you or other experts. But you have to develop your employees. You have to, consider succession planning. What does that process look like? Continuity for the organization, and then just job skills in general, right? Do you want to do some crossover training to make sure that people can backfill each other? All of those are part of the process. So I would always say as a part of any kind of like feedback or when you're doing large initiatives, like do some type of needs assessment to kind of get like a feel for what the needs are and don't just automatically jump and judge the process, especially when you're in a larger organization. If it's a small organization, it can be kind of like informal, right? You can have the conversation like, what are our training needs? Or I always say like identify skills gaps, bottlenecks, and then you can build out training needs from there. And then just like on a personal level for the people that work for you, like what skill sets do they like to develop or feel like they need to develop? Or as a leader or a manager in working with your team, you should also be able to say, hey, I think you're good at this, but I want to take you from good to great. Help them get to the next level, offer them opportunities. And that could even be in the form of, projects too, just depending on what you have, what's available, the resources. Get creative with it. Now, we do all of this stuff to work on shifting culture, but what about recognizing and rewarding employees for the work that they do, man? Do you know that a thank you can go a long way? I mean, have you ever been surprised when you put in the hard work for something and you get a thank you? That can go a long way. So as a leader, and even as a person who, working as part of a team, when people do things for you, the common courtesy is to just say thank you, support them, show some level of appreciation. In your meetings, you might even have an opportunity to be able to recognize like a moment where people can recognize colleagues, give kudos around the room, So look for creative ways to do it or incentive programs, incentivize some of the things you do. Now, you got all of these people working for you and you're talking about building this cultural resilience. Are you taking care of yourself? How resilient are you as a leader who is part of this leading these cultural shifts? You got to take care of yourself, but you also got to make sure your people are taking care of themselves. I like the term work-life balance. Some people it's just like, is there ever really balance, right? So some people use different terminology, but we're always seeking the work-life balance because we should be supporting employees to achieving a healthy work-life balance by offering flexible work arrangements, like promoting time off policies. It's crazy to have people with 60, 70, 80 days of leave and encouraging self-care practices. It's important to recognize as organizations that employee well-being is like maintaining resilience. That's a part of the process. And so it's not like you burning out your employees as you're trying to quote unquote create this culture of resiliency. Don't burn the people out who are working for you. And of course, my favorite is always embrace diversity and inclusion. Now we talk about that in context of race, gender, sexuality, and all that stuff. But what about in terms of diversity of opinion and perspective when it's something that can be innovated to improve how we improve how we operate as an organization, right? So be open-minded. Don't just think that just because you're the leader, you're just captain of the ship and every idea and everything you say is right. So I'm talking to leaders in this moment, but if you are an aspiring leader, just keep that in mind. That's part of your growth process is embracing diversity and inclusion. So making sure that the team feels like that they can share ideas because we want to foster environments for creativity, innovation, and resilience. And then the final thing that I would share with you on this topic in terms of, besides encouraging innovation and adaptability by embracing that DEIA concept, right, is to be prepared for crisis. Remember I said like previously, like organizations shift their organic, it's like organizations themselves are living things. You gotta be able to navigate crises and challenges. So when we talk about resiliency, do you guys have a plan, a crisis management plan? And I mean, we talk about all this emergency management. What about crisis management in terms of just like operations and stuff like that, right? It's one thing to mitigate a natural disaster. It's a whole other thing when the bottom falls off the business. So there should be protocols in place, clear roles, responsibilities, communication channels in the event that these type of things happen for emergencies, but also you should be planning for the ops piece too. Just on a regular basis, like we want to make sure that we are adaptable if we're not just, and that could start with just your emergency plan. So by implementing like these types of strategies, you are literally embedding resilience into the culture because the big thing is, like I said, you want to make sure that people are engaged, that they feel a part of the process, and there's a level of connectivity. Because if you don't have that, then you just been listening to these videos if you're not implementing something I'm saying, then you just wasting your time. You've got to take accountability in your organization. As a leader, you're tasked to lead. You're tasked to set the tone. And so hopefully some of the things I've said in this video series has helped you. Now, I'm going to continue to talk about this stuff for years to come because it's a passion of mine. But if you want to follow us on social media, we are on LinkedIn as Work Solutions. But all across social media, we're known as Career Coach RX. And I have no intentions of changing that because that's what we were known for first, right? So Career Coach RX is that what we do one-on-one coaching. If you have any questions, leave a question or comment in the chat. I want to know what you're doing. I mean, if you are working for a large company or a small company, do you feel that your organization is fostering organizational resilience or supporting you as an employee? Give me some feedback. Let me know in the chat, and I'll see you in the next video.